welcome to the Relationship Support Network Couples Webinar. I'm Dr. John Slate. You know, our relationship experiences can be challenging, but healthy relationships can be learned and strengthened. And each week we explore practical ways to communicate better, rebuild trust, and create greater emotional connection. At the Relationship Support Network, we believe lasting change begins by changing ourselves, not by trying to change someone else. Today's topic is why my partner shuts down when feeling betrayed. And before I get started, I want you to know that I will be emailing these notes from this presentation and a worksheet for y'all to work on. Let's get started here. These are the goals of this session here today. One is we want to talk about shutdown meanings and patterns that happen. I want to talk about what betrayal means and feels like for the two different perspectives. I want to talk about especially recovery after shutdown, prevention, and identity. Identity, if we don't change our identity about who we are, then we keep having the same conflicts over and over again. And so it's this aspect of identity is one step beyond therapy. Therapy will talk about coping skills. Identity stops the pattern. And I will explain that further on in here. And then at the very end, I will ask about any questions that we might have, and I will be turning off the recording at that time. I don't need to record that. So first off, behind shutdown, there's physical patterns, of course, and then there's also emotional patterns. And so sometimes in the physical patterns, you know, we think things like, you know, we see the physical signs, which I'm sure you've all seen, you know, the silence, the short answers, walking away, blank expressions. There's the emotional signs that I wanted to point out. And a lot of times that looks like what I'm going to call confusion. When we're in our emotional mind, we often think that just this one thing right here, our frontal lobes, is our mind. It's not all that. There's really more to it than that. And so what there is also is the emotional mind, which is midbrain. It's called the limbic system. And when one is dominant, the other one is not. This kind of works like a seesaw. And so when your emotions are strong, your thinking is not. Let me give an example. You ever heard the expression, I'm from Tennessee, and I've heard this all my life, mostly from my dad. And he say things like, I'm so mad, I can't think straight. I used to think it was just one of those Tennessee sayings, but it's really not. When we're in our emotional mind, there is very much that confusion. There's other times that we shut down, and that would be things like, the things like our fears, when a whole realm of different constructs are there with fears. Like I fear I'll be saying the wrong thing. Nothing that I say will help here. I only make things worse. Feelings like that. And so often on the sides, different sides of the argument, we have different things going on. There's the fears, like I just mentioned. I'll say the wrong thing. Then there's the emotional wounds, like I'm not good enough. I'll be rejected. the silence. I just don't know what to say. And so sometimes we assume that the other person is feeling a certain way. And sometimes those assumptions get us in big trouble. We need to be aware of our different triggers, our different reactions, because small issues can cause big fights. If they accumulate over time, if they're over the same subject, we can have big fights over one small issue. And some of the shutdowns that we go through are not even the result of what's happening right now. They're due to childhood patterns. Maybe if we grew up and, yelling and criticism, we associate with punishment and rejection. And so today, a disagreement can trigger an old survival pattern. And so shutdown could be about feeling emotionally unsafe. When I feel judged or criticized, I feel unsafe. The problem with that criticize word, sometimes it often starts as just a complaint. Hey, you left your socks in the middle of the floor there. But those complaints get interpreted different because of our past. Because of our past, if we don't update our identity, which I'm going to be talking about in just a little bit, then we are kind of in place. Betrayal, the betrayal patterns rise up one more time in our life. We can be identified by our past behavior. One thing about a betrayal situation, if we're identified by past behaviors, we stay locked into those. For instance, if a person, I've had plenty of people in alcohol and drug recovery. I think I talked to Mitch about it. I had 3 sober living houses in Nashville. And, they were, I like AA and all the A's, but one of the things that I do not like is that you always have to repeat that, I'm an addict. And it kind of doesn't take us out of that behavior. There's 2 different patterns that happen at the same time during betrayal. Good to understand them. The disruptor, the person that caused the problem, their biggest feeling most often is shame, hopelessness, shame, and continued hopelessness. And the crazy thing about that is it often leads to relapse. On the other side of the situation is the person that's been betrayed. So often they feel not good enough. They feel role confusion. I mean, I have all these different roles, that I feel in my life, and it seems like I'm failing at all of them. Maybe work is difficult, maybe a lot of things, and there's these patterns. And the important thing to note in a situation of betrayal is feelings do not heal naturally. So if you expand on that, that means avoidance techniques don't work. Silent treatment, sweeping it under the rug, those type things, they just don't work. And so, what's very important at this time is to really see how we can heal from these. And so actions are one thing that creates change. And so when we think of betrayal, we think of these different patterns. We and I'm going to go through those here, through some relationship rituals, through things like actions change feelings. I don't think I've sent this to you, Mitch. And so one of the things I have is a 30-day challenge. And what that is doing something constructive and positive for 30 days, every day. One might be, one thing, maybe certain periods of time, like after breakfast, before breakfast, before the kids wake up, whatever. And it might be things like, I really appreciate this trait about you. Or why don't we go do something, just the two of us today, and get a babysitter here. Actions change feelings. Secondly, facts change feelings. And so when you think about facts, it's kind of when we're in our emotional mind, we are not thinking with, again, our resources up here. We're thinking with our feelings. If you've been at a bar at 2:00 in the morning, that's not very intelligent. That's the same thing. And so first, you have to think about what facts are really going on in here. And so recovery after a shutdown, this is where we really start getting into the meat of what I wanted to talk about today. The other things might not be anything new to you, but recovery after shutdown, the very first thing is regulation of myself first. And we do that with things like slow, deep breathing. You regulate yourself first. Slow, deep breathing actually affects the vagus nerve, which affects our parasympathetic system and causes us to calm down. Slowing down the moment is important. The second thing is trying to listen on a deeper level. Most people, when you start an argument, they want to resolve it and get it over with. Well, we're getting ready to get in that in just a second. That's not the best thing to do. Understanding could be one of the most important things you do. Not a critical understanding, not why are you thinking like that? No, that won't fly. But maybe help me to understand what you're feeling right now. What are you going through? What's going through your mind? Trying to stay present, because if you don't stay present in a conversation, you say, I got to get out of here. What does that say to your partner? A lot of times it says, I'm not important, or I'm getting dismissed one more time. And so trying to be curious, calm during these periods of time, curious questions such as, what I said, the curious of, tell me what's going on with you. Next would be validation. To validate the other person's feelings, there's probably some value or some understanding about why your partner might feel the way they do. And maybe that curiosity is, help me to understand why you feel overwhelmed, because I really respect you, and I validate, be curious. And if it's just not calming down, a short timeout with an explanation avoids those abandonment feelings. But short timeouts. I had a session this week, and the woman told me her husband came home drunk, and they haven't this was the first time in therapy that they'd talked for a whole week. And so what that really meant is he felt like the relationship was over with. He went down and slept on the couch. And, she assumed that meant that maybe he had really hooked up with somebody else while he was out. She wasn't really sure what that meant, but that was the assumption. So you can very much see talking during these important periods of time is just really very important. Next, I wanted to talk about preventing. How do I prevent a shutdown? One is through ownership statements, I statements. It kind of sounds like this. I realized I got upset during our conversation. I own that. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. Owning our errors that we make says to the other person that they're not being attacked anymore. Some of the things that you might notice is you notice early warning signals, arms crossed, and so arms crossed, lose eye contact. And so it's a good idea to create a timeout plan in advance, for some of these emotional and physical symptoms that we're talking about here. When I talk about, in every setting in life that we have, at work, our laws, they all have rules. In a relationship, we do not. And at the time of an argument is not the time to be setting new rules. When a period of time is calm, that would be having some rules about our relationship. Whether they make sense to anybody else isn't important. One of them could be when we start to get mad, when I notice maybe from a 0 to 10, maybe when I notice that we're getting up to a 4, maybe I just need to kind of stop myself and do that slow, deep breathing to calm me and try to calm my partner. Go through some of these things like validation, curiosity, and slowing the moment. Those 3 things will help us to calm. And then you might try some things with your partner. That's called co-regulation. Co-regulation could look like we're both kind of starting to escalate. I don't want to disrespect you. And so let's see if we can kind of calm down a little bit. And if it's just, I don't want to calm down, I'm just done with you, maybe a short timeout protects the relationship. The next thing, again, this next thing is something that we never get to in therapy, whether it's due to people not having enough money or enough time to continue. And this is also the reason why we keep having problems in therapy. I'll get people that I talked to a year ago that we're doing fine, but now they're back on top of the anger and anxiety and depression. Identity matters, and having rules and calming skills are so important. So therefore, updating our identity becomes super important because it's the way that we interpret life. If I don't feel good about myself and you're mad, that just proves I'm really not good enough. It just really validates that I'm a disgusting, no count person that'll never become good enough. Identity matters because of the emotional interpretation that we give to events in our life. So these type of things of updating your identity so that you aren't acting the same way you did as a child, or maybe in some other difficult times, or a difficult relationship that you might have had prior, or maybe a coworker at work that's being nasty to you, or a neighbor, or somebody that threw a ball through your front yard. I don't know. But if we don't watch it and define who we are and update our identity, we interpret events as all being negative. We collect negativity. Having rules in advance is important to being able to use them at the time. Agreed upon rules in advance. It's not as important as what they are, it's that they are in place. Often it's a good idea to print them up, to sign them. I've had people do that because people keep forgetting. Remember those rules. To have a conversation plan. When our emotions get to a 4, we're going to try to calm. We're going to try to get through this. And so updating identity matters, and healing begins with identity being updated. That's a real important statement. If our identity, again, does not update, then we keep having the same tools that we keep using for different arguments. One time could be about the socks in the floor. Second time could be about the way the person drives. Third time could be about not washing clothes. I don't know. But they're all fought with the same tools. And so we always get the same results. Something to think of about healing identity. These are different ways that we can heal our identity. These are called identity deposits. I like that because if you think of a bank, there's withdrawals and there's deposits. And so some of the deposits could be keeping my word, staying present, telling the truth, listen calmly, showing empathy, returning after conflict. Some of the withdrawals could be shutting down for days, hiding information, becoming defensive, minimizing pain. So we can build our identity through daily identity routines, collecting evidences. I would suggest, you'll see this in the material that I send you, to build up our self-esteem, our identity. I suggest keeping records of the positive things that we do during the day. They don't have to be, I got $1,000 in the mail. It doesn't have to be, I went out and spent $500 on a dinner with me and my wife. No, it could be those things as I talked about earlier, like keeping your word, staying present, listening, telling the truth, and write those down so that during the evening, you can accumulate those. And if you did that for a whole week, I would imagine, I'm thinking of things that we normally do during the day. We take care of our children. We hold our children. I vacuum the floor. All the many things we do during the day, writing them down. And if that was 3 or 4 a day times 1 week would be 28 different evidences over a month. I lose my calculations, but it is close to 100. And doing some proactive type things, such as trying to be a better partner, trying to be the person that my spouse would respect, defining my future self. It's good to start updating your identity. And so these are things you can do along with affirmations, maybe like in the morning. Affirmations are statements that you make about yourself and what you want to be. I can be a person of integrity this day. I can tell the truth. I can stay within boundaries that I've set for myself. Mantras are a little bit different. Sometimes we need some very short statements that we can use during temptations or difficult stressors in our lives, like, I can get through this. Actions change feelings, facts change feelings. So some mantras can be, when I have a tendency to think about things, I can do push-up. When I have a tendency to fear, I can remember times I've been confident. Short statements that help you get through the moment. So these are different ways that you can start to build identity. Next is about calming. Calming. We change our identity when we learn to self-regulate. Calming skills would be breathing. Like I said, practicing that slow, deep breathing when things are going good is a proactive way to reduce your anxiety. If on a scale of 0 to 10, normally your anxiety is around a 6. If you were to spend 3 different times of the day, maybe 3 to 5 minutes each time, just going through those breathing techniques, or I'm going to sound like an Apple advertisement here. I was looking for my phone. I have an Apple phone. If you don't, Androids have the same thing. I just don't know the name of the app. In Apple, it's I Breathe. And if you were to get that app, it actually, you set it for the time periods you want to do that deep breathing, as I mentioned, and you would set it for the time. It actually would show a ring going around it, indicating you need to breathe. And then you would hold the breath. There would be no more line or no more vibration. You can keep this in your pocket and help that calming skill. And so it's something that helps you to pace yourself through apps, through counting, through doing other things such as grounding, but slowing down the moments. If you think about recent argument that you had, a lot of times things just pop out fast out of your mouth. They're called reactions, not responses made with your head. If you notice that things are starting to go faster than your thinking is allowing, you need to slow down. Slow down. Easy for me. I'm born here and raised here, a Southerner. Easier for me to slow down and make I statements, not those attacking you statements, and trying to stay in the present, not talking about last week, last year, remember when. All those things are calming skills that we have to emotionally regulate. Finally, I'm going to, before I get to the questions here, I'm going to quit recording, kind of a private side here. And so These are some questions, though, that kind of go over some of the things that we've talked about, that express things, that we talked about: identity, we talked about prevention, recovery, and shutdown. Again, you're going to be getting these worksheets and notes of this whole session. It will be posted on my website,